Good morning, everybody. Xin chào. Times in Vietnam at the moment, and Hanoi especially. What we're going to do this morning is very quickly run through current market overview for the real estate market in Hanoi for the first 3 months of 2018. So very quickly, just in terms of the economy, what we're seeing in the economy at the moment, CPI target for the year 4%. First quarter figures about 2.8%, so coming in under target. International tourists, target for the year 15 to 17 million international tourists. For the first 3 months of the year, 4.2 million tourists. This is why you're seeing a lot of congestion in the airports at the moment, up 30% on last year. So we're seeing huge amount of interest in Vietnam as a tourist destination. Credit growth, so target for the year, 17%. Credit growth achieved about 2.8% in the first quarter. Now, this is something that we just need to watch for this year. There's going to be legislation coming in on the credit growth and the banks lending on the real estate in particular. The stock market, so the VN index, you'll see lots of very strong news about this. VN index up 63%, and the Hanoi index up 46% year on year. Lots of foreign investment coming into the stock market. A lot of IPO action happening. A lot of state-owned enterprises now being privatized or equitized. So we're seeing strong inflows of investment on the equity market. GDP growth target for the year 6.5 to 6.8%. Q1 figure. This is a record figure going back to I think a decade. We haven't seen this figure before. 7.4% for the first quarter of the year. ADB now I think announced yesterday their revised target for Vietnam for 2018. Is 7.1%. So very positive on the GDP growth. The exchange rate, so mainly held stable for the previous year. So a little bit of movement, about 2.1% movement on the dong to the dollar. In terms of foreign investment, again, very positive times for foreign investment in Vietnam, attracting a huge amount of interest from a regional point of view and also from a global point of view. So FDI for first quarter of this year, 5.8 billion US dollars. This is actually registered. In terms of implemented capital, about $3.9 billion. Now the percentage, and I think the important part is the percentage of where that's going, about 58%, nearly 60% going into the manufacturing sector. So this is where we're seeing a lot of activity at the moment. Manufacturing, industrial, logistics is getting a lot of activity, shift of movement coming out of China, and Vietnam is being, a large beneficiary of this movement now. So, which is why we're seeing quite a lot of interest in that sector. The other sectors being wholesale retail, then real estate, and a couple of others there. South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, the top 3 foreign investors in Vietnam at the moment. In terms of some of the notable M&A transactions for mostly for the first quarter, a couple of transactions in Hanoi. They have acquired a piece of land in the CBD. Unfortunately, we don't have the actual price. It's confidential. Agriseco sold a piece of land in Phan Boi Chau. There we go. Very good. $12.7 million. So that's a couple of transactions in the first quarter of this year. And a couple more in Ho Chi Minh. Nomura buying a 24% stake in Suntec office tower, grade A building in Ho Chi Minh. And first Strategic Hospitality REIT, which is a REIT coming out of Thailand. And this is one of the first acquisitions of a REIT in Vietnam. So it's come into the Vietnamese real estate market. So they have acquired the Capri and the Ibis asset in Ho Chi Minh for about apartment for performance. So this is for Hanoi. So new launches for the first quarter of 2018, nearly 9,000 units. This is high-rise apartment units. 9,000 units launched first quarter of this year. That's actually down quite a lot on last year, down nearly 50% on last year. And you can see there in terms of the segments, about 58% of those new launches in the mid-end segment. Units sold for the first quarter, very active on the sales rates. So nearly 10,500, nearly 10,600 units sold in the first quarter 2018. That's up 7% on the previous year. So the market is still very, very active on the sales volume rate. So the number of sort of new launches, everyone knows we like to buy off plan. Certainly that is still very much happening. We're getting a lot of projects that are being oversubscribed and still attracting very, very strong interest. Average selling prices. Now this chart is a little, this is average selling prices across all sectors. So it's a little bit ambiguous in terms of you don't sort of see the true picture as such, but it gives you an idea. Now, in terms of average selling price, and I think this is purely because, the weight of new stock that's coming through to the market, we're actually seeing average selling price coming down. Now, that's an interesting fact that, I think the number of new launches is managing to keep the actual selling price down, when compared to the previous year. Number of new launches, actually this is for completions for 2018. So big year for completions. So what we saw 2 or 3 years ago is a lot of launches happening. So those completions are now happening this year. All the activity, so you can see the larger red dots are for projects that are over 2,000 units. And the general shift you can see is all about to the west of the city, west of the CBD, west and the south mainly of the CBD. So the general shift and all the development activity in those areas. So I think this is a very interesting heat map. So you can just see what is happening, where the new completions will be taking place this year. Total completed stock. Now this is where I was just having a conversation with Ralph just before the presentation. Ralph's very different view in terms of real estate, in terms of which is going to be very interesting on the panel discussion. So our view on real estate and the number of new supply coming through. So total completed stock for Hanoi is only, this is for high-rise condo apartments, only 150,000 units. Compared that to the population of the city, so officially 7.6 million, unofficially, obviously way, way more than that, probably 8, 9 million at least. So in our view, there is still room for growth. There is still this constant question of oversupply in the market. Are we going to see a bubble in the market? I think that is still a very valid question. And then certainly in certain sectors of the market, and predominantly certainly the premium and the higher end and luxury end of the market, there could be some issues moving forward. But we still see, our view is that there is still plenty of room for growth in the affordable and mid-end sectors. So the outlook for 2018, new launches, another 25 to 30,000 new launches. Completions, now this is the interesting part for Hanoi. All those developments that happened, that started over 2 or 3 years ago will be completing this year. So nearly 55,000 units are going to be completed in this, throughout 2018, which is a big, big number. Lots of units. Are they going to be occupied, or this is when we start to see whether it's been an investor or a speculator buying these units, or whether it's going to be an end user. Office performance in Hanoi. Now this has changed quite dramatically over the last 2 years, and we're now seeing very different picture in terms of the office sector in Hanoi. Total supply only 1.8 million square meters. Now what we've tried to do is just show you how that compares to Bangkok, and I think this is a very good comparison. 1.8 million square meters in Hanoi. Bangkok, total stock is about 9 million square meters. So it just puts you into perspective the size of the market that we're dealing with and where we think the potential growth can come from. So 5 times bigger in Bangkok. We're obviously talking different market, different stage of the cycle, and a more mature market. On average, we sort of say Bangkok maybe 10, possibly 15 years in front. Net absorption, I mean, you can see over the past number of years, it's fairly standard around the 100,000 square meter mark. Q1 registering at 24,000 square meters. And average rents, so for the grade A, about $29. So all these rents, I mean, they've been flatlining for some time, but we're going to start to see these rents starting to creep up over the next quarters due to fairly limited supply coming through. So future supply, how is it looking? A little bit of more future supply coming through. Nothing on the grade A side, only grade B coming through this year, about 150,000 square meters of grade B space. Next year looks very, very poor in terms of future supply. And then 2020 onwards, this figure is just not for 2020, it's sort of 2020 onwards. Then we'll start to see some new grade A supply coming through to the market. Some of the notable projects, most of you, I'm sure, will know all of these, and I think a few of the developers in the room today of some of these projects. So HUD Tower coming through this year, Discovery Complex, D-Tech Tower there. Some of the projects that will be completing this year, which I think is a welcome new supply coming through to the market. And future supply, as we say, about 166,000 coming through this year. So we expect to see increase in rents, certainly on grade A and grade B space. Very quickly on retail performance, in terms of existing supply, completed stock, just under 1 million square meters of completed supply. Very little in terms of retail in the CBD area of Hanoi. Occupancy rates on grade CBD, due to that limited supply, fairly high, nearly 95%. And outside CBD, back down to 83%. Now, retail still seems to be a real, I mean, for me, it's a very hit and miss. You can get some shopping centers that are performing well, some shopping centers and retail podiums that are just not happening and not performing. Generally down to the design, the layout, the tenant mix. Future supply, some new supply coming through this year, 270,000 square meters of new supply in 2018, then a little bit more throughout the next 2 or 3 years. Upcoming projects. So you'll see from the new projects that are coming through, with the exception of the new Aeon Mall in Hadong. It is the only full-blown shopping center that is coming through to the market. The remainder of those new developments are all retail podiums. Big shift, I mean, a lot of activity on the retail podium side. The difficulty with retail podiums, they tend to be compromised due to the design, the layout. You always have a lot of columns on the retail podium, so it's a pretty challenging for landlords to get right. Retail outlook, as I say, about 270,000 square meters, and very little, well, no new supply coming through on the CPD for the foreseeable future. Moving on to the industrial market. So the industrial market in the north is getting a lot of interest at the moment. Lots of activity, as I mentioned, a lot of FDI going into the manufacturing sector. This shift of low-cost manufacturing moving from China. We're now getting a lot of inquiries on the industrial side. And in terms of the north, total supply for leasable areas, about 11,000 hectares, with Haiphong and Bac Ninh, probably the largest of those two areas that are seeing most activity on the industrial side. The most recent one, so we've recently had meetings with a lot of the suppliers that are going to be supplying parts for VinFast. I'm sure you've all heard about the VinFast, the cars that our friends at Vingroup are going to be launching their VinFast car, which are going to be put into, they are due to launch actually July of next year. So, what we're now seeing is a lot of the German, suppliers of BMW, Mercedes, looking to, set up operations around Haiphong to supply VinFast. So we're getting lots of different inquiries from all over the world, due to, VinFast in particular. Average net rent. So overall, standard factory, about $2 to $5. What we're seeing now, standard factory is moving up the scale a little bit. So average rent's now picking up a little bit. And if you wanted to acquire a long-term lease, on average about $76 a square meter. Occupancy rates. So lots of interest in this sector. So occupancy rates attracting strong interest. So on average across the all provinces, about 81%. And we're showing there Hanoi at 100%. And then future supply, this is to 2020, another 18,000 hectares coming through to the market, with all the activity, or a lot of the activity, focusing on Haiphong. So as I'm going to just close off now, the big news of the quarter was the signing of the CPTPP, which I think Fred's going to touch on. So, as you know, it was originally America included in the TPP, but unfortunately Mr. Trump has decided that he's no longer involved. But good news for Vietnam, CPTPP hopefully will be signed off this year, and I think that's going to be a positive. It will be a positive for Vietnam, and I think Vietnam will stand to be one of the largest beneficiaries of that signing agreement. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Fred.